the case. People are just coming to see Danny. Hi, Vivian. I haven't seen you for ages, Vivian.
I have a feeling we can't make this a private Zoom chat.
No. We might be able to. I think you might be underwhelmed or overwhelmed at the few people that choose to dial in. Menachem
Mark, I
tactically.
love the beard.
Well,
if he's going to talk
it's all
about
irrelevant. I was going to say it's a relative thing. I was about to say that I'm late because Danny said to me, "You can't keep this Zoom going because you've got." I won't use the exact word she said. Let's just say fish, but I think it was something else. It was a 4-letter word, all in your beard. It's embarrassing. And then it occurred to me as I was washing my beard, Menachem, I don't know how you eat anything. Like my beard's 1/10 the length of yours, and it attracts all sorts of food.
So I think we might start with that. So what I'll do is I'm going to just mute everyone. And I'll give you that one warning that we're both on Zoom as well as on YouTube, but we can talk about absolutely anything. So hold on one sec. So the answer to how I keep my beard clean is nowhere near as complex as moustache. I find the moustache a particularly challenging thing to when you're eating hummus and tahina, or you're having orange juice with pulp, it's like a catchment center. But I'll tell you a whoops. I'll tell you. I'll start. No, I didn't mean to mute you.
That's all right.
I'll tell you.
I thought I'd said too much that was insightful already. You're like, what the hell's this guy doing, making me talk about pulp and moustaches? I'm getting rid of him.
So I'll tell you a story about things getting caught. It's one of those metaphors. So there was a desire to study every creature in the ocean, and so they cast a massive net. And after years of studying every creature that was caught up in the net, the study concluded that there's nothing that's smaller than 2 millimeters in the ocean. And this was heralded as a massive discovery that they could conclusive, after years of study, conclude that nothing in the ocean exists that has a diameter of less than 2 millimeters. Until a lovely Greek fisherman with a long mustache said, "Can I ask you one question, dear scientists?" "Sure." Said, "How large were the holes of your net?" So this is an analogy that is often brought in the conversation around religion and science, in that everything that science discovers is 100% a discovery, but it doesn't mean that the things that it hasn't discovered doesn't exist or don't. And it allows for the incredible, miraculous impossibility of God, while at the same time the luxury and the joy of studying the universe as we keep discovering it.
I agree with you. And it sounds like this is scripted, but given you only told me I was presenting, I've only found out when WhatsApp went around about 20 minutes ago. I can't say it is, but it's exactly a point that I harp on about, that I actually first used as a way to criticize my older sister, as one annoying younger brother does, who's a doctor. And I used to always say medicine, but it's true of all science, is because it is science, it's treated as a factual, which it is, or scientific base, but the mistake is also a complete art or a complete field. It's not complete. It might be scientific, but it's not complete. And if you look at the history of discoveries, it's always learning more, and things that were known to be true in the past are unnecessarily proven false. Some are, but many are proven to be part truths, which effectively make them false. And it's a big mistake to look at something that's scientifically proven and think that therefore it's the entire answer, and often not being the full answer is equivalent to being wrong. And it's something to always question that. And there is room for a concept of God as defined in some form, and together with science. There's also room for an evolving science. It too, like everything, has a history and will have a future.
It's yeah, there's like the humility of science and there's the ego of science. You know, that concept of discovering how incredible the universe is and being humbled by it. And then there's discovering the universe and saying, I know everything there is to know. So it comes down to human attitudes to it all. It's like you meet the doctors that know everything, and then the doctors who we don't know. I suppose I want the cocky one operating on me rather than the one that says I don't know.
And part of this is steering this towards doctors is a dear friend of both of us, Simon Olensky, told me he was joining tonight. But I know he's sitting there on mute, so I'm saying comments that might tempt him to unmute himself. But it's fishing. No, but you're right. It's interesting. You taught me this actually. Is I think the start of our relationship was me walking into your study, different one than you're in now, saying this is all the waste of time. These marriage classes. I don't believe in God. You're just here because you want the money for the wedding, and I got to be here because I got to go through it, or something like that. I might have said. And you laughed and said, I've seen his type before. And sometime later, I'm like, oh, wow, I hadn't seen your type before. Because by the end of it, I was infatuated and found a way to, integrate into the most atheistic view of God and align that with my broader science and philosophy set and moral set, which made me, it's very powerful if you can find a way to do that. And I think that was the premise originally of our relationship.
So I wanted to ask, if you don't mind me asking in front of everyone, our relationship started before you had a beard.
I can't confirm or deny that. My beard comes and goes.
Well, it was never this long. And I would like to believe that I may have been the first Hasidic Jew that you had a relatively loving relationship with. Maybe not the first you ever had a relationship with. But for those who don't know, Mark and Danny lived in Williamsburg for a few years and even sired a child there. And for those of you who don't know, Williamsburg is an extremely, extremely ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, or has a large ultra-Orthodox neighborhood right there in that Brooklyn area. So that's just a bit of background. So Mark, being that you come from I would say a spiritually atheistic background, or atheist spiritual.
Mixed.
A culturally Jewish, but jury's out about the whole God thing in a very active way, but not against. But living right there in Williamsburg, what did you so for those who don't know, I recently put out a meme. We put out a meme 2 months ago that said, instead of being anxious about things, lean into it with curiosity. And so this was actually inspired by Mark, because Mark is one of the most curious people I know. In that he will inquire and ask of anyone anything that he wishes to know about them, irrespective of whether it's an appropriate time to engage in conversation. So you do this from Indian.
I'll take it as a compliment, but I think Danny's
100%.
laughing in the background. She thinks I do it more when it's inappropriate.
He probably does, but that's why he comes home from Indian restaurants telling us the most amazing stories about how he drank masala chai tea with the chefs in the back. So did you ever expand that curiosity to your neighbors in ultra-Orthodox Williamsburg?
Can you hold on, please? Then you can do this, like. It's yes, but it didn't result in me asking them any questions or doing anything because they wouldn't engage with me. But yes, I was extremely curious, and this was pre unorthodox. The Netflix shows, some of those. This is at a time where I had very little colour. Like the full extent of my exposure to their community was when we went to our favourite Italian restaurant, which was in South Williamsburg, and you saw everyone around you and wanted to learn more. That was it. So can you just hold on 1 second? So,
Yeah.
so yes, I was very curious, but I was curious not from the what are they thinking and how like what's their background concept. It was more that how did it come to be that such a community that from an outside perspective is so similar to my own. Well, we're both Jewish. And even, I would say, oh, they're so similar to yours, Menachem. They're both, to simplify, it's a religious Jews. But as you got to know the way they live and how they are, they're so different to each of us. And then they're in this sort of microcosm of this insular world within New York City, like the ultimate of Sin City in some respects, hedge fund landscape, Axelrod and billions. And they're living there in this world with their own school buses, restaurants, their own nature that's so different than anything I'd ever seen before. And it's to me, it's like going back in time or going forward in time. I'm not sure, but I was very curious.
Did you ever come across them in context of business?
Yes.
What was that like? What is doing business with ultra Orthodox Jews in New York, coming from an Aussie Caulfield background? What was that like?
Challenging.
Why?
They've got a very unique way, they'll come across with stuff stuck in their beard. They haven't quite mastered the orange juice and pulp thing quite like you have. Late, there's 6 mobile phones, look like you're not paying attention, be rude, not stick to any norm. I would feel embarrassed in group discussions on their behalf because I was also felt similar, both being Jewish, but sharp, very sharp,
They were
like
sharp.
street smart sharp. And I mean, I don't like generalizing on anything because I do like generalizing because it's fun and it's simple, but it's a mistake. And in business, when you're talking with someone, often when they're on the other side of the table, you're always going to lose if you generalize. So I wouldn't say everyone's smart or everyone's like this, but as a generalization, sharp.
So can we just come back to that? How do you, because you meet a lot of different people. You've worn many hats over the last 10 years, most notably this one. Um, and so you come across nationalities, cultures, all sorts of different things. How do you stay in tune with this is an individual and I'm going to have to start from a clean slate? I can't allow for generalizations because you're dealing with either large amounts of money or influential opportunities of infrastructure, etc., investment. How do you make sure that you're not generalizing, not going in, oh, here we go, it's going to be someone like this, that, or the other? How do you make sure the orange juice doesn't derail you, the pulp and the moustache?
I don't know if I do this so well, but I'd say a few immediate comments. One is I don't not generalize. I think generalizations are amongst the most powerful and useful tools I have, particularly in my current role. You come across a huge amount of things and, you need to, like, particularly in an investment hat and the pace of the modern world with technology, getting something wrong is not as bad as not being able to make a decision. And the only way to make decisions is to filter an enormous funnel down quickly. Because if you size and risk manage your life and your portfolio and everything around you, your time properly, you can afford to make mistakes if you're happy to suffer the embarrassment of doing so, providing you size your winners and manage risk properly. That's true not just to dollars deployed, but in how you spend your hours, in how you allocate your relationships in many ways. But if you don't filter and generalize, you won't get anything done. So that's the first thing. The next thing I'd say is you gotta, like, my rule is to I think I forget the saying. So it's like sort of generalize early but question often. Like you have to assume often, or assume often, always question. Like you need to make assumptions and generalize, but you need to always think, what's my bias? What am I bringing in? Why do I think that? Does this person remind me of somebody else? Am I thinking that? Does this person have a language barrier? Is that an issue? And then to always try to check my own assumptions, but then also try to check, why is this person here? How did they get to where they are, and why are they showing up to talk to me? So what do they want out of this? And how do they come to be in this situation? And if you think through that, it's rare that someone you're dealing with who's chosen to talk to you and has gone through the pathway to get to talking to you in whatever way is someone that isn't worth talking to. So you need to, if you think through that context, you'll normally come to the right conclusion.
How quickly do you go through those questions?
The generalization I'm conscious I make within 3 seconds, normally before I've met someone. If I email you and you take X amount of time to respond versus Y, I've already formed a view. If you sign off with your name versus just regards, versus if you call me Mark, Mr. Freeman, if you don't address, like the way you respond to things, if you respond on WhatsApp versus email, I've already formed a view. Text
So,
versus WhatsApp,
you're conscious that you're forming these views?
always.
Right. There's a lot of activity going on in your head.
Unfortunately, yes. The hard part is before you make a decision that is hard to reverse, to stop, sit back and say, what have I actually done? How did I get to form this view? And then ultimately, like anything, and you know this, everyone knows, like you're not paid in life. And I don't just mean in money. You don't have rewards in life for making the right decision yourself. It's knowing your own limitations and surrounding yourself with people that are going to question that. So in a good team member, but also just in any good process, it doesn't need to be someone directly in your team. I'll consult with people from different worlds, different backgrounds. You know, I'll check things with Danny, who know me. I'll check things with my father. And he may know nothing about what I'm doing, but he knows my mentality and approach. Likewise with Danny. I'll check things with my boss who have a different view. Team members will say, oh, you've seen 6 things like that. You said no because person number 4 annoyed you and this person reminds you of them. It's good feedback. You know, so it's just surrounding yourself with the right checks and balances to make sure you optimize your chances of success. And the last thing is what I said before, and that's something I'm not so good at, is being forgiving of yourself. Like you're going to make mistakes. So you do your best to have to generalize, you do your best to know yourself, you do your best to surround people who know you to pull you up, but you still have to go forward. And then you have review, like you have no choice.
So we do tend, you and I do tend in our own lives to be quite hard on ourselves. I'm currently in a Jewish community leaders course, which is a once a week course being run by this group called Launchpad, which I think you know about. And actually today there was a workshop, and the vast majority of people are extremely hard on themselves, vast majority, and it's anywhere between perfectionism and just or an overestimation of capability. So trying to achieve things that are either impossible for the individual or just nothing will ever be good enough for the individual in what they're trying to do. In your exploration of this and seeing it in the workplace, I'm talking about in that area of where people really strive, is it something that is more predominant now or something we're more conscious of right now, in your opinion? So has it always been around, but we just...
What, the being harsh on yourself?
Yeah. Like, were water carriers in the village heavy on themselves in the same way as anyone is today? Because it's not an industry thing.
I never carried much water in a village, but I would think so, yeah. I think it's a personality type. Like I think some people aren't because they might be at some stage, will make peace with it because the cost of being so harsh isn't worth it. I think other people are. And they're hard on others around them, and that's when it becomes unforgiving. But if you choose to do it on yourself as a means to extract greater performance, I think it's true in all, as you say, industries. It's true of sports people. It's true of parents. It's true in your social life. You probably feel that as a rabbi, like, I could have given better advice. I could have been this. I could have been that. You'd feel that in a business head. I think it's a personality type. I think it's easy to say now is different. I think every generation is different, but it's often different in similar, they're still similar at core. I think that type, yeah, I mean, I think it's a consistent personality trait. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's different now? With that, I guess, because the only answer I can think of at the top of my mind is because of technology and the rate of speed or the speed of feedback. But I don't know if that's what causes it. I think it's a personality type separate to feedback. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's a good question. When I look at Hasidic literature, there definitely is an understanding that people do get quite caught up in themselves. But it's also true that when people are on a spiritual path or a religious path of sorts, they do start getting quite fervent and into it. So is it that the religion is addressing people who are on a religious path, or is the religion addressing a behavioral tendency of all human beings? I probably 8 months ago was talking to an old teacher of mine who I wanted to just get some advice from, and he said, and I was, it was a moment that I was being quite critical on myself about how I was davening and timing and all that, and he said, listen, you can aspire for whatever you want, but we've got the Shulchan Aruch, we've got the Code of Jewish Law. So if you're to know whether you're doing something right or wrong, go to the book. Don't go by what you want to achieve. Go to the book. And if the book says what you're doing is right, accept that what you're doing is right. Now, you want to do things better, that's on your own time. But you can't criticize yourself as being, you said, you can't say you're a bad Jew or you can't feed insecurities because you're not doing it to the level that you want. You have to first realize there's black and there's white, and anything that's white is white, and anything that's black is black. And right is right and wrong is wrong, and start with knowing what your base level is and then climb from there. Don't make your aspirations the base level or the bar against which you measure yourself. So you said, for example, okay, if you didn't meditate, but did you say the words? Did you get through the primary paragraphs? If you did, let's just celebrate that, and tomorrow you can meditate. But don't assume if you didn't do it perfectly, then the whole thing is thrown out. He said, nowhere in the Code of Jewish Law does it say that about prayer. So he said, look at whether the Code of Jewish Law says, is a half job useless, or is a half job actually already something, and build from there. So, but the Code of Jewish Law doesn't say that. So that was his attitude, in that when you're passionate, you are going to be quite self-critical. So you've got to be able to create markers of normalcy and measure yourself against those, not against your own definitions of normalcy.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but emotionally, of course I agree with it. The hardest thing is I tell it to everyone else. Rachel always says, you tell everyone else, why don't you believe it?
Because I don't know if I agree with it.
Why not?
Because I think it's like, that's a way to say I'm being too harsh. There is I've gone good enough, or I've done enough because I've met what's in the Shulchan Aruch, but I wanted to do more, but it's okay, I've done enough. The way I see it is the self-criticism and the standards I pose upon myself just a tool to drive me to new levels. What I need to be conscious of, like with everything, like every individual, is when do the tools that you've created no longer serve you, and when do they serve you? And I could justify doing absolutely nothing or absolutely everything is good enough or not good enough. And if it's not the Shulchan Aruch, I could have pointed to another book or another barometer or another rabbi, or in one instance, you could have said, if I saved one person, or if I've done something by one person, I've done a great job, when I've failed 50. Or if I failed one person, I've failed everybody. Like, you can do whatever you want. It's when can you no longer tolerate it, can those around you no longer tolerate it, or when is it causing you more harm than good, that something is not serving you, and being able to pull yourself out of your own head and look at what it's actually doing for you. To me, that's the barometer, and then there's always ways to justify it.
So that's
Doesn't it?
you go.
Maybe I'm not saying it's wrong. I just look at it slightly differently about what outcome is this tool delivering for you.
So that's my criticism of modern philosophy and self-help books, is that they cherry pick, which is what you just said. You can find any text, any philosophy that's going to support your laissez-faire approach or overly critical. But what I see in the Shulchan Aruch and in general in Judaism would be what I see in any philosophy, is that I think you'd be hard pressed to find a philosophy that allows the person to just do whatever they want all the time. So we're dealing with an ancient wisdom that's a well balanced wisdom for society, so it says over here go easy on yourself, over here it's just not good enough. So it's like I'll eat in the sukkah if it's pouring rain and -4 degrees. I'm not leaving the sukkah, I'm eating outdoors. If I'm willing to push myself to that extreme, and the same book says, but by the way, when you pray, if you do it for 10 minutes, that's good enough, then it has measured my push and pull.
Hmm.
So I think one would have to adhere. If you're going to consult with a text, you've got to adhere to the whole tradition. Otherwise, yeah, I'm a bit Buddhist today. I'm a bit Jewish. I'm Hasidic because I love to do this. I'm Buddhist because I like to do that. And I'm a Christian for this. I turn the other cheek. And all of a sudden, we're a bit of everything and we do nothing. So, but then we get to the subject of people become very scared of becoming married to a particular philosophy. They become scared of being. I think this is a modern thing of being owned by a religion or a philosophy or a spirituality, and it scares people. I think that's one of the things that scares people about religious people, whether Jewish religious. I think it scares people about Muslims. Any devout person makes Westerners uncertain because, like, gee, this person is willing to do irrational stuff in the name of religion. That scares the living daylights out of me. That means I can't corrupt them with money or power because they're behaving in a way that they're not responding to the normal means that are available to our society. So I think people are scared of becoming holus bolus, immersed in a philosophy or religion.
But I think some of the, well, at least in my, like the religious figures that I admire most, yourself amongst them, aren't like that. Like you, I mean, it's hard to see through the Zoom or the books on your bookshelf, but you'd read as extensively in science as they're fake. It's a Zoom background and so.
I've got a
You think?
stick behind them.
Yeah, no, you actually, it was a choice of that or the Golden Gate Bridge. You know, everybody I know now is a Silicon Valley investor out of Sanford. They've all got the Golden Gate Bridge, but they're really based in Fountain Gate or something. But I actually just made that up. I might use that tomorrow. But no, it's people that are really well. I'm listening to a great podcast by Jonathan Sachs. Like as well versed in science as they are in religion, I don't think they're corrupted by something alone or, you know, unreachable by those. They see the religion as an important guiding post, but they don't see it as complete and the sole guiding post. They see it as complemented by modern knowledge, which is the religion accommodates for. And I think that's important. I think, but you're right. I mean, it can be intimidating when someone fervently, randomly believes something. You know, that's the sort of, it's as irrational as racism or violence as it is to believe in something without any complete faith, you know, without any question. It's completely unhuman.
And yet that's the fervor that leads to success. So would you say that many of the successful people you have come across are almost devout in the belief of their vision or mission or purpose, or
Yes.
and the only difference is what it is that they're worshiping, whether it's more relatable, like, okay, I understand this person's going to conquer an industry versus this person's going to transcend, or
That's right. But that devoutness, that irrational devoutness or that focus on that has its costs. They might be successful, to use your word, they're successful, but I can guarantee you that they've given up and compromised in other areas of their life to achieve that success. Everybody does.
right. So like everyone makes sacrifices. Some people sacrifice their family. Some people
Yeah,
sacrifice time, health.
a ram.
Mel asks, how do we define success? Mel, I use the word success very callously. It's good that you picked up, and I think Mark also picked up. It's success in inverted commas, because going from street beggar to multi-billionaire may look successful, but if on the way you've killed 5 people, had 4 divorces, and have 4 children that don't talk to you, is that success? And then a person who's got a loving family, a loving spouse, and they like a coronavirus lockdown doesn't scare them at all because they've got everything they need, but they haven't got a penny to their name. Do we call that success? I mean, Rochel and I often discuss this, that a housewife, a mother, is a job that has no pay and therefore is not measured by society as actually being worthy. So if you choose to stay at home and look after your child for 4 or 5 years, and you don't do anything, so you gave up your career, or what do you do? Like, what do you do all day? Like wash dishes or cook? And it's very it's not respected, and yet, and you and I have discussed this, and yet we always say family is the most important thing. Where family is the most important thing, then why doesn't society necessarily celebrate parenting in the same way it celebrates the success? If you have good children, are you going to get on the front cover of Rolling Stones if you have 7 great kids who love you, as you would if you had 10 incredible singles released, or you just you went from 0 to 500 million overnight?
No, but to me, that just goes down to the confidence. Like, you need to have an inner confidence and resilience. You need to be able to participate in society, but you can't let society define your own sense of self-worth. You'll always be chasing the next thing, because once you're on Rolling Stone, you want to be on, this, then you want to be on that, and then where do you stop? Like, you have to have that view, and I think more so than ever. And yes, I wasn't, as I said earlier, a water carrier in a village back then, but I do think more now than before, and particularly from COVID as well, actually, mind you. I think the comment you made about being a stay-at-home parent or carer is still valid. It's not fully recognised, but I think it's only a few centimetres or inches beyond what it was. But I do think there's a greater recognition of that. And I can talk firsthand on this, like having spent a lot more time by government decree at home.
Yeah.
I can tell you sure as hell the 1 hour today I spent at home alone with 2 kids in my hand was a hell of a lot harder than trying to juggle a conference call with 18 people. That's much harder.
Yeah. And are you finding it in your work? So we haven't actually spoken. You work. There's fair amount of pressure in your work, I would imagine. There's a lot of responsibility. The pressure of responsibility, or are you just a workaholic? You could actually get away with 4 hours a day.
I ask myself that question every day. I don't know the answer.
So I wanted to know whether you've found in that general industry of finance and etc., whether there are realizations. Have there been aha moments for many people, like who have now been stuck at home, trapped at home, where they're saying, "Wow, family is not what I thought it was," or generally, are you finding the industry is the same? People want to crack on with their work, and they're not necessarily becoming more family oriented. What is happening?
A bit of each. Like, I think people now outside of Melbourne that I deal with that have gone back to work, slipped back to the old normal. I think that people, though, do appreciate that things are hard. And yeah, like, to have my 2-year-old son running in the middle of a conference call and scream something about gumboots and jumping in muddy puddles when you're dealing with somebody that runs a $2.5 billion portfolio. At the start of this, I would have been highly embarrassed by it. Now I almost wear it as a badge of honor that I can integrate that into my work life, and they understand that. So I think there's a greater level of tolerance and understanding for sure, and the understanding that everybody you deal with, no matter who they are, is human. And that's something I probably always knew, and it's probably a strength of mine to be able to unpick people and put them into their context as humans. Helps you deal with a lot of different people from walks of life. But I think everybody's feeling that now and seeing the strains of being human and the priorities of being human.
And the people have gone back to work. They haven't forgotten that yet.
Not if you remind them, but I think old habits die hard.
So it's interesting because I was thinking
I don't
about
know yet because I haven't gone back to work. Sorry, I don't know.
you.
Well, I work a lot, but I haven't gone into the office. I don't know myself, but it's my read of others in other offices.
Yeah. I was thinking a lot today. I went for a walk around Caulfield Park, as I do with different people, and I've noticed a few.
Hopefully under 1 hour, Menachem.
Um, yeah,
You're,
generally it is.
you're
I'm
a quick
a fast
walker.
walker, yeah, and then the rest is all pastoral care. Just put it on the tab. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
um, so so what I've noticed is if my mask isn't on properly, or I stop to talk to someone, I just pull it down. I become very self-conscious about my mask not being on properly and guilty. Like, is everyone going to judge me? Which is crazy. And then also,
Do you judge other people if their mask isn't on properly?
I do. I notice a wave of thoughts like, "Where's that person's mask? Why aren't they wearing
Have
a
you
mask?"
have you ever told them?
Nah, nah. I
I've
don't.
told someone. They're annoying me. They pushed in front of me in the line at a coffee shop. And I couldn't help myself and said, the mask does nothing if it doesn't cover your nose.
You said
And then
that.
I felt, yeah, I just couldn't help myself. And then I felt terrible because I'm like, my mask doesn't always cover my nose.
So I have noticed this whole like very deliberate putting on my mask, show everyone I'm a law-abiding citizen, and vice versa. Like if someone's not wearing a mask, like I saw a dad sitting on the street. He was sitting outside his gate, and the wave of thoughts like, is he breaking the law? Is that the right thing? And does he now think I'm judging him because I looked at him for 1 second too long and I'm scared to look at people? And then also wearing masks, like do they recognize me? Do they not recognize me? Do I have to say hello? There's so many new stresses. Now, if this was over and Melbourne, but because Melbourne's in a longer lockdown, habits take anywhere between 3 days and 3 weeks and whatever. Everyone's got the different sciences of when a habit becomes a habit. But if we're doing this for another few weeks and ongoing, there are going to be habits that are forming in the Melbourne species of humanity that aren't the same as elsewhere in Australia or other parts of the world. Like I talked to friends in New York, it's like it's done. Coronavirus is over. Like it went through, it killed hundreds of people in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Most of my friends in New York had coronavirus. Most of them didn't even realize. Like, oh yeah, it's true. I went for 2 weeks with no smell, no taste. I was feeling sluggish. Oh, I guess it was coronavirus. Like, it just went through. And although schools are a bit more funny right now, like 20% are wearing masks, but otherwise it's gone back. So they talk about Pesach. Like, oh yeah, Pesach was crazy. But for us, we're still in Pesach 6 months on, and whether we are going to develop our own form of trauma, memory, experience that is different, and are we going to form new behaviors in judgment that other human beings around the world going through coronavirus don't experience?
Possibly. I mean, I feel it now. You're in the butcher and someone walks in with their kids. And you look at them and you're like, the kids are running amok. They're not wearing masks. They're running up to you. Like, get away from me, you super spreaders. Like, it's, you feel this distant from humans. You think, geez, I wonder if I'll feel that in 2021 and 2. I hope not. But I like to think that people go back to, I do think it reverts, but that's just me thinking the norm. I
I've
just think of a
I've been
law of
walking with one of
averages. But
these. I've been walking around with one of these, and today I decided I want to go back to the mask because I'm too transparent. I don't like that
yeah,
I can't see anyone, and they're allowed to get by without saying hello. But now me, I've got to. So I'm going back to the mask. I want to
and
go
I
back.
think it's a good note, Menachem, as we get to our end of our 40 minutes, that I would say one of the nice things of masks is that you can keep the orange pulp in your beard for that little bit longer without getting discovered.
It's a little something I'm keeping for later.
Yeah. And it's only my secret, just me and my N95.
Before we wrap up, we've been very fortunate to have a special person that I don't think you know, Mel Lewis. Mel, we've discussed a number of subjects. Are there any closing words that you want to share? Unmute yourself on, because especially like when we talk about previous generations being not that Mel's an old man, but he's a very reflective person who as a chemist, met many different generations and got quite close with many of his customers. Are there any thoughts that we've said that, from your perspective, are different, or you want to cement?
If I could, I'd just like to. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Mel.
I don't know. First of all, I don't know what you do. I missed the introduction. Just give me 1 second.
I run an in-house venture capital function at BHP to set up a thing that invests in emerging technologies to drive innovation in the company and potentially provide new business lines for the company.
Now, my big word is gratitude, not so much success. And I think gratitude and success are mutually opposite, not mutually opposite. A lot of successful people don't have much gratitude. And I just wondered if you come across people who have made, for some reason, Western society values how much you're worth as your value of your success. And I value myself by what I've succeeded, and I benchmark it against dollars and cents. And I just wondered that all the people you mix with just talk about money and making deals, or they actually value, just have gratitude for what they actually have, their family, their kids, roof over their head.
The people in my world today 100% do. And that's why I chose this. Like when I was in New York and you're dealing with hedge funds, it's the ultimate, like, I don't know if you've seen the show Billions, but that is what it's like. Those people are genuinely real people. That was my daily life. It haunts me. I think that in Australia, that's less so, even in the finance world. And in what I do here, particularly given that 70% of what I do is around climate and climate options, I think there's a lot of people that see what they're doing with a greater social and societal purpose. That purpose drives them, and they're happy to be involved in what they're doing at work. And similarly, they put that in the context of their family life, and they see just the time horizons as long. Whereas in other parts of the world that I have operated for in the past, absolutely not. Like New York is a transactional place. Your rent is a transaction. No one thinks they're going to be there that long. And there's very little gratitude. Everything is tradable, from obviously your work and assets, but also your partnership with your family and even your own health and spirituality.
Really?
That's not true in the world I'm in today. And I chose a pay cut of 40 to 50% to be in this world.
Really? So it's not a Western thing, it's more of a USA versus Australia thing.
I think even that's generalized. It's just cultural. Like within Melbourne, there'd be pockets that are different. Within New York, there's artistic communities. Like I think people move, things move, but I think there are personality types, and that's the nature of culture, is that it brings all those around it to that norm. And if you're brave, you'll realize it's not for you and push it out of it. And if you're not, you'll stay in that culture, whether it aligns with your deep moral set or not. That's my view.
So how do they value success, for example, where you're working?
I think being a good person.
Are there KPIs on success, or do you?
There are KPIs, but the KPIs include people development. You have your own personal development plans. As a leader of people, having like strong surveys from your employees and from others and from externals about being a good person. At the moment, we have a weekly wellness survey about people's mental health. We have voluntary long weekends that as a leader you can opt to offer to your team. So things like that you offer up, and how team and the people around you feel are important. People go out of their way to get to know your family. And so you yourself start to think, yeah, that's really important. Like people will ask you on the call, how's Danny doing? How's Jack doing? Oh, your newborn Oscar, he was in hospital. How's he going? And that's, I don't think that's a KPI, but people notice the people that ask that and don't.
That's wonderful.
Mark, just to finish with, that is not, a cynic would say, well, that's how you get the best out of your employees. Would you say that there is something cynical about it, or is it actually there's a general shift and there's a culture of wanting to preserve the human values even within the workplace?
I don't know where it begins, and it would for different people in different spots. Some people genuinely want that. Some, maybe the cynical view applies and they see that as part of the trade. But I think once you start that, and I don't know, because I would like to have thought I would have wanted to been had an interest in that anyway. But once you start asking that of people and seeing their personal side, it's addictive. To deal with someone where you don't see that side is weird. You don't find it enjoyable. And life's too short to do business with people you don't like, you
Right.
don't find enjoyable.
That's great.
Mark, thank you so much for.
Thank you all.
For just
Thank you for staying on the line. Clearly, everyone's just stuck in lockdown, but
I know. Thank you.
You remain one of the most interesting people I know, and I appreciate that you took time away from home and work, because at night it could be anything with you, to just schmooze. Thank you.
thank you all. Thanks, Menachem, for inviting
Have a good night.
us. See you guys.
Good night, Danny. All right. See you all. Thank you for joining. And thank you for the last words, Mel.
Thank you, Menachem. That was lovely.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
See you tomorrow.
Right. Bye.